Supervisors back to order. We're on agenda item 20A for discussion and possible action for the appointment of a person to fill the Carson City treasurer position. May we have the first candidate, please? Thank you, Ms. Burketta. Good afternoon. If you'd push the button and once and just let go, should turn the mic green.
All right.
There you go.
Perfect.
State your name for the record, please.
My name is William Grant Brewer.
Great. Thank you so much for applying for this position. And
my pleasure.
we really appreciate it. What we're going to do today is ask you a couple of questions each, and then we'll interview the remaining candidates. You're welcome to stay while we do that.
Okay.
At the end of the interview process, we will select a candidate to fill it. So,
excellent. Thank you.
okay. Again, thank you so very much for applying. So tell me about your training and experience that qualifies you to hold this position and why you want to serve as treasurer.
My training and background professionally is in housing, specifically in single-family housing. I did a lot with home financing in my last position, so understanding how taxes work, property taxes, was an important part of my position. Currently now I'm a building inspector for Nevada Rural Housing Authority, and so I've been able to get to know the prices people pay for those units, and then also the issues that come with housing and taxation and things like that. Why I want to serve and why I want this position is pretty simple, is I really love Carson City. I was born and raised here. Miss Schutte was my health teacher in middle school, and also I've been able to meet a lot of people in my position that have purchased homes and who are on housing choice vouchers that need some perspective brought in to the office, I think, and also need someone who's there and willing and ready to serve them.
Maybe just a little follow-up. You think that, how would the treasurer's office impact someone on a housing choice voucher? What do you mean by perspective?
Well, I don't necessarily think that a lot could be affected by that, but I do think that it's good to have someone who they feel is in their corner, who has the best interest of Carson City in their heart, and knows what's important to them. I think it's important that a treasurer knows what's important to the citizens that they are working in.
Okay. And then will you explain the process and the steps by which private property may be sold for non-payment of taxes, and what latitude, if any, does the treasurer have in complying with those steps to resolve a tax deficiency?
Well, I do know that the treasurer's position is responsible for making sure that those property taxes are paid. And if they're not, then they take action with the law and making sure that they either repossess the property or that they go about it that way. And I think it's also important to know, too, that making sure that everything is done on your part to make sure that the property taxes are paid beforehand, or make sure that the people have the help to pay the property taxes and understanding their situation. That's my basic level understanding of how that works.
Thank you. Supervisor Giomi.
All right. William, thank you for applying. The city's investment and portfolio policy lists 10 or so options that are authorized for investment. I'm curious to know what method you'll use to determine the city's investment strategy, and if you could be specific in your answer.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be, of course, I know that this all circle back to the specific part, but you want to be sure that you're following whatever trends are going on now in the finance world, and specifically like right now the hot topic issue is inflation. That's what's being talked a lot about in financial sectors, and so we'd want to be sure that we're doing everything we can to keep our money safe and make sure that we're in a good financial standing. That being said, with understanding where we put our money, we just need to be careful and conscious of where we put our money and the extra money that comes in from those tax revenue that we collect.
And then my next question is a little lengthy. The treasurer is a city department head with the authority of an elected official. In reality, you report only to the electorate. However, I believe the citizens of our community expect a smooth operating government that works collaboratively. How will you balance your elected autonomy with the cooperation necessary to work as a member of the larger city team?
That's something that I would want to do the first little bit, that if I were to get this position, is to work with the department heads and understand what their expectations are of the city treasurer and understand what their specific needs are for each department, and making sure that they have the support that they need, that they feel that they need from the city treasurer spot. And then also knowing that, I'm not necessarily I report to the people, and that I make sure that the Carson City residents are happy, is how I would balance the two, making sure that I'm doing everything in my power to make sure the citizens are comfortable and happy here with how their money is being spent, and then also how the departments are seeing their support coming from the Treasury.
Supervisor White,
Am I on?
you're live.
Great. Thank you for being here today. What's the most important function of the treasurer's office, and what will you do to make that function operate better?
I think the most important part of the treasurer's office is to handle the money with integrity and handle the revenue that we receive with integrity. I feel that my biggest strength is my honesty and the integrity that I bring to the table. I understand that this is people's livelihoods. This is the money and tax revenue that we receive from their property taxes. So it's important that we are doing what's best for the citizen and making sure that nothing is being lost or spent frivolously, and that we can report back and feel good about the report we give back to the citizens of Carson City.
Thank you.
Supervisor Jones?
Hi, William. Some people feel, including myself, that if you are appointed to this position and you decide to run 2 years from now, that you are the incumbent, which gives you a leg up. Is this your reason for running, and will you run again?
It's not my reason for running. My reason for running again is to make sure that Carson City has someone who has their best interest in mind. It's not to get myself in any kind of political standing, but to make sure that the right thing is being done with the citizens. If I were to run again, it would have to be, I'd want to be sure that I like it, that the citizens like me, that the department heads are happy with my performance. Those would all be factors in my decision to run again if I were to get this position.
How would you deal with a taxpayer that declined to pay his taxes because they were unhappy with the city's performance in, say, a particular area or in his neighborhood?
That would be a difficult situation for sure. The first step that I'd want to understand is where they think that we're at fault, and then also rules are rules, and depending, even if they are unhappy with certain performances, they still have to pay their taxes. That's still the law of the land. So, sometimes people aren't happy with government performances, but that doesn't mean that they get a waiver from paying their property taxes. So, we would have to assume the responsibilities of making sure that those are collected.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Schutte?
Hello,
Hello.
and nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
You have grown up.
Yeah, a little bit.
All right, my first question is, tell me about a time when you established rapport and a positive tone with a person or group where perspectives and opinions differed.
Absolutely. So right now in this position, I inspect housing for those who are on a housing choice voucher or on what's commonly referred to as Section 8 housing, so lower income individuals. And often with government work, sometimes they're not all too pleased with how fast or slow things move in the government process. But I'm able to go into these homes, and I feel like I've established great rapport with most of them, if not all. I'm able to understand, sympathize, and put myself in their shoes. I think those are the most important things. Put aside my own perspective, and then try to see it from their point of view. I think that that's something that every elected official needs to do, is to sometimes put aside their own opinions and see it as the person you're working with does.
Great. Thank you. And then what talent and/or expertise can you contribute to the treasurer's office, kind of above what you've already talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. So the talent that I bring is, I believe, is my personality. I think that that's something that, of course, is different with every person, but normally when you hire someone, you hire them for their skills, but unfortunately, sometimes the whole person shows up on Monday. And if I were to get the position, I know that the person that would show up on Monday would be someone that Carson City would be proud of, and that the department heads would be proud of as well.
Well, thank you.
Okay. I'm just going to follow up with one last question then. What would be your immediate goals or objective in the first 90 days if you got the position?
In the first 90 days, as I mentioned earlier, I'd really want to sit down with the department heads and understand what their expectations are, what their needs are. I'd also want to sit down with the employees at the treasurer's office and understand what they would want in a supervisor, and what their experiences have been in the treasurer's office, because I feel like those employees are a wealth of knowledge. They've been there for many years, and so I could understand a lot and learn a lot from them. I also would want to understand how we've been financially for the last few years, look at our financial records and statements, see where our investments are, just understand our overall financial standing now. And then we can start to work on an outlook over the next 2 years of the term for the treasurer.
Thank you so very much again for applying.
Of course.
You're welcome to stay in the audience and
Excellent,
listen.
thank you.
Being first, you can hear everybody's
Okay,
answers.
perfect.
And then we'll make our decision. And again,
Excellent.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all you.
Okay, getting Mr. Dolly.
Feel pretty young, do you, Lisa? Having,
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please put your name on the record.
Okay, my name is Dave Dolly.
Okay. Well, we want to thank you so much for coming in today to interview for the position of treasurer. I'm pretty sure you know how this process
I
works.
do.
I'm going to skip that. He's been around the city for a very long time. So I'll start with, tell us about your training and experience that qualifies you to hold this position and why you want to serve as treasurer.
Thank you. Sorry. I have to tell you, yesterday was my 28th anniversary with the city. I've been the assessor for the last 18 years, and I'm more nervous now than I have been in a long time, because it's been 28 years since I've interviewed for a job. So, my background, again, I started with the city 28 years ago, and I did go back to get my college education. I have a bachelor's degree in accounting from the University of Nevada, Reno, and I'm going to have to go back and forth a little bit. The reason I'm applying for this job, primarily, is because in 2018, March of 2018, the city signed a $1.2 million contract to replace the current CAMA system, or the assessor system, and the tax collection system. We've worked really hard. I've worked very hard with the CAMA system. I've worked a lot of weekends, a lot of nights, trying to get the system itself up and into a very usable and friendly system that can be used. I take full responsibility for the selection of this system. It was my decision, because at the time, 15 of the 17 Nevada counties decided that this is the system they wanted to go with. Since then, 7 counties have actually backed out and gone with another county, but I'm not gonna do that because we are committed to this system. It's a great system. It's turning out to be a fantastic system for the CAMA system, for the assessor side. It's my understanding that the treasurer side needs some work. And the treasurers have not come together to actually form a group to actually do the work. And what we were finding as assessors is the fact that the CAMA system, the company would make a change for us, and then the same exact statutory requirement would be different, or is the same, but the programming would be different for another county. And so they would then fix it for the other county, and then it would mess up our programming. And so I thought, you know what, we need to come together as a group. And I kept telling our CAMA vendor that we needed to come together as a group, and they wouldn't do it. So I actually organized a meeting, and we started meeting as assessors every 2 weeks to discuss all of the programming and what the major programmings that we needed and how we could come together and organize all this stuff. We slowly but surely added and asked the DevNet company, that's our CAMA vendor, to come and meet with us so that we could stop all of this dual programming and get it right the first time. And it's worked, and we've met every 2 weeks since then, and that was about 1.5 years ago. Somebody needs to do that for the treasurer side, because the treasurer situation and the tax collection system is the exact same way. It needs to be worked on. And when I talked to the vendor about it, and I told him, this was my plan. I was going to apply to become the treasurer. If I got the position of treasurer, I was going to organize these meetings with the treasurers. I was going to try and pull us all together so we can get a really good system. Because I feel so responsible for this system, I need to make sure that it's working really good. This is a system, it's a 10-year, again, $1.2 million 10-year contract that we signed. It needs to be working, and I'm not going to leave the city with a program that is not working very well. So going back to my education and the portion of that, sorry, I'm long-winded, I'm a politician, sorry. When I found out that the current treasurer was not going to run again, I decided that was going to be my time to go over to the treasurer's office and fix this CAMA system, or fix this tax collection system. So I actually went back to school. I got accepted into the MBA program at UNR, and I've been taking further accounting classes and investment classes so I could prepare myself for this position. And so halfway through, I didn't want to become the treasurer right now. That was not in my plan. I fully intend on running for it when my term was up as assessor, because I have a commitment, again, to the taxpayers that this is, I was committed to a 4-year term. I needed to complete that 4-year term. Unfortunately, the situation doesn't fall that way now anymore. And so I kind of look at this as an opportunity that I can get started 1.5 years earlier fixing this system so that we have a great system for the city and for the taxpayers.
Great, okay. Explain the process and steps by which private property may be sold for non-payment of taxes, and what latitude, if any, does the treasurer have in complying with those steps to resolve a tax deficiency?
Well, so the penalties for the taxes are 4%, 5%, 6%, and 7% for each quarter that the taxes themselves are delinquent. At the end of the 3rd year, the treasurer at that point takes a tax deed on the property, and then they give the notification that, and they bring it to you to let you guys know that this sale is going to be taking place. And then at the end of the 4th year, they actually can go to an actual auction at that point. I know, like with mine, because as the assessor, I am supposed to be selling mobile homes if they're delinquent for any 1 year. We don't like doing that. We try to make every effort in order not to sell the home. And I know right now that there is a program, or there's a company out there, it's called Propel, and it's a company that would actually buy the lien so that we wouldn't be forced to sell the home. And so that company would buy the lien, and then the taxpayer itself would make the payments to that particular to that particular company. So I'm sorry, did I answer all the questions there? Should have written them down, I apologize.
Just if there's, if you think you have any latitude in complying with the steps to resolve a tax deficiency.
Article 10 of the Nevada Constitution says that there's fair and equal taxation. And that's what I have always tried to abide by. Everybody in my office knows consistency. We have to be consistent with every taxpayer, no matter how they are or what they are. Sometimes we don't like doing that, but Nevada Revised Statute and the Nevada Administrative Code determine how we are supposed to be handling all this stuff. Sometimes we don't, well, almost all the times we don't like to do it to sell any kind of property, but sometimes we're forced to. We have to abide by the Nevada statutes.
Thank you. Supervisor Giomi?
Hi, Dave. Thank you for applying and going through this arduous process. The city's investment and portfolio policy lists 10 or so options that are authorized for investment. What method will you use to determine the city's investment strategy? And if you could, please be specific.
I'm going to have to plead the fifth on that one, honestly, Stacy. Mr. Giomi, I apologize.
Fine.
I'm not as familiar with the investment portion of it as I am with the tax portion of it. I do know that the treasurer is able to use the investment or actually do the investing themselves, and they are also able to hire somebody. I don't do anything, again, going back to the standardization, I like to, if there's a question or something that I don't know, that I'm not aware of, then I would be asking somebody. I would be calling, like in this case, I would be calling the state treasurer's office because, I mean, that's NRS 355 states that that's the state investment portion of it. The investment is something I will have to learn, but it's not something that I will just automatically go out there. I always get, if I ever have any kind of questions as far as any kind of policy or procedure, I call the Department of Taxation or I call the Attorney General's, or not the Attorney General, but the District Attorney's office.
Right.
And so.
Okay. The treasurer, I mean, you know this, the treasurer is a city department head with the authority of an elected official. In reality, you report only to the electorate.
Correct.
However, I believe our citizens expect a smooth operating government that works collaboratively.
Correct.
How will you balance your elected autonomy with the cooperation necessary to work as a member of a larger city team?
Trying to figure out how best to answer that, so I apologize. As the elected official for the last 18 years, I think I've done a good job of it. Since I've been with the city, I'm currently on my 6th city manager, and I believe I'm on my 7th finance director. And so each time somebody comes in, we have different changes. As an elected individual, like you, I believe personally that it's our responsibility to question if we don't believe that something is right. Sometimes some of those elected officials don't agree or they think that if we question, we're difficult to work with. And I believe it's up to us as the elected official to do that. I have a good working relationship with the department heads. And so I believe it's important for the elected official, for me to be there. That's why I'm always at my office. That's why my office, you can see me as you're walking by. You can see my desk, you can see me working. It's important for the electeds to be there. And it's important for the electeds to be able to get along with the other department heads or anybody in the city.
Can I ask a follow-up on a comment you made to Lori about about DevNet, and you said that you wanted to make sure it works right going forward. I mean, wouldn't you be able to do that even in an assessor's role to help the treasurer's office? I mean, if you weren't appointed, you wouldn't be willing to help the treasurer's office succeed?
No, it's
With
not an act,
the-
it's not an act of willing. It's an act that, it's the fact that it's not my department. It's really not my department.
No, I get that.
And so, and it's not that it's working wrong, it's not working wrong. It can be better. There are certain parts of it that are very difficult to read. There's certain parts of it that, in which the workflow is not there. I've tried. I just don't want to overstep my boundaries. Because that is not my section. The CAMA is ours. The CAMA is the assessor's portion. And like I said, I've worked very hard at it. I want to do the same for the treasurer, and I don't want to overstep my boundaries, and I don't want to offend anybody in the treasurer's, whether it be our treasurer's department or another treasurer in the city, because there are still 8 other treasurers that are currently on this system. It's not my place to work on their system.
Thank you.
Supervisor White?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
What's the most important function of the treasurer's office, and what will you do to make that function work better?
I don't think you can say that there's just one most important. I think they're all super important. You've got the banking, you've got the investing, you've got the tax collection, you've got all of that works and has to work in order for the whole department to succeed or for the whole city to succeed. So I don't think that there's any one thing that you can do. I'm a hard worker. I would never ask my staff to do anything that I wouldn't do. I'm always answering the phone. I'm always at the counter. I enjoy that. I mean, that's honestly, I enjoy interacting with the taxpayers. You need a treasurer who's going to be there, and I will be there. I have from the last 28 years, I've had the work experience, or not the work experience, but I guess I'm old school. If I'm supposed to be doing a job, I will do that job to the best of my ability. I guess, I'm sorry,
It's all right.
I'm very passionate about my job. I'm a very passionate person about the fact that I was elected by by the voters. The citizens of Carson City elected me to do a job. I need to do the very, very best job that I can do. Whether that's as assessor, whether it's as treasurers, or what, that's me. Sometimes my passion comes out in, some people may say it's an angry tone. My tone is, I know I have issues with my tone, but it's passion. It's the fact that the bills that go out, the documents that go out of that office have my name on it. I want the stuff to be right. It needs to be right. Because if it's not right, then we're having to go back and we're having to do double duty to fix it. We don't need to fix it. I don't want to fix it. Let's get it right the first time. And so I would say every function in the treasurer's office is important. You can't just narrow out one.
Thank you.
Supervisor Jones?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Some people feel, including myself, that if you're appointed to this position and you decide to run again in 2 years, that makes you the incumbent and gives you a leg up on election. I assume you plan to run if you are appointed?
Yes, sir. I had planned to run I still plan on running, whether I'm appointed or not.
Okay. How would you deal with a taxpayer that declined to pay a portion of their taxes because they were unhappy with city's performance in a particular area?
Sir, that's an easy one. We deal with that all the time. The assessor's office, I'm always considered the tax man, and I don't know why. I'm always been the tax man for the last 18 years that I've been assessor. We've had a lot of people who, over the years that we've dealt with, who are not happy with how we do it. There's a process. If they're unhappy with the valuation of the property, there's a process to appeal the valuation of the property. If they're not happy with the fact that there's some portion of the city that they're not happy with, they really need to try and work with that portion to try and get it better. I would love to help out, but That's not what the treasurer's office is required to do. The treasurer's office is required to, at that point, follow the laws, follow the administrative codes that are established already to try and collect the taxes, whether or not this particular person is happy or not. We do get, and every time that they get a protest, somebody protesting the payment of their taxes, we get a copy of it. I'd love to help them out, but we have to follow the laws and the administrative codes.
Thank you.
Supervisor Shute?
Hello. Okay, first question, tell me about a time when you established rapport and a positive tone with a person or group where perspectives and opinions differed.
Can you repeat the question?
You bet,
one more time,
absolutely. So tell me about a time when you established rapport and a positive tone with a person or group where perspectives and opinions differed.
I guess I would have to actually go back to the creation of our DevNet contract. When we first started, in 2006, December of 2016, our current camera provider, who we'd had for over 30 years, sent us a letter saying, we're closing our doors, you need to find a new system. So there were 3 of the 15 assessors who actually went out, we researched it, we actually went and traveled. I went and traveled back to Illinois and to Missouri and researched all of this stuff. And so we were all in favor of this contract. And so Carson City kind of took the lead trying to negotiate the best contract we could with this company. And it didn't work. And Carson City was accused of trying to sabotage the whole contract for the entire state when we weren't. We were just trying to protect the counties by getting milestones put into it. And so I guess when I was being attacked, and I have to say it because I got some really nasty emails and everything like that, trying to keep a positive tone, trying to keep everything together was difficult. But that would probably be one example. I've had situations in the past, you know, I know I have a tone issue, and I have to just state that. And I've really been trying to work hard on it. My tone, even though I'm not expressing anger or anything like that, my kids tell me I have that kind of a tone. So that's something I'm working on.
Okay, thank you. And my second question, what talent and/or expertise can you contribute to the treasurer's office kind of above and beyond what you've talked about?
Expertise.
Or
Dedication.
talent, yeah.
I really don't, I mean, for me, it's just hard work. It's hard work, dedication, it's doing what I love. I mean, and that's why I come to work every day, because I do love what I do. And so some dedication.
That's fine.
I guess I'm stumped, so I apologize.
Oh, no, that's fine. And I think dedication and hard work, those are great traits. Thank you.
Okay, so then I just have a final question. What would be your immediate goal or objective if appointed in the first 90 days? Tell me about that.
In the first 90 days? Well, first off, I'd like to really know that the treasurer's office has 5 computer systems that are being conversions that are going on. And so I would like to know all about that. I'd like to know exactly what every employee does. And so I would be sitting down with them, going through them, trying to learn their position to see what they were doing. I'm not going to go in and change anything at this point. We've got a great staff over there. The ladies are super wonderful to work with. They know their stuff, and so I'm not trying to change anything at this point. But I want to learn. I want to know what's going on. I want to see if maybe there's possibly a way that we can streamline some of it, because that's currently what we're trying to do with our system. And I truly encourage all the staff to try and streamline processes. And we've streamlined a whole bunch of them. And so that would be my first 90 days, is to learn the investment system, exactly what needs to be done with that. So the first 90 days would be learning and being able to educate myself on things that I don't know already.
Well, thank you. So you know the process then. We're going to bring the next candidate in. We've got 2 to go, so you're welcome to stay in the audience. At the end of that, we'll select the
Great.
candidate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dave. We just won't call him by name at all, the next one. Yikes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have wiped that down. I apologize.
No, I told her I would do it, and I forgot.
Impressive. Hello,
Hello, good afternoon.
good afternoon.
Okay, if you'd go ahead and take a seat and
Thank
state
you.
your name for the record, please.
Can I take off the mask? Is that okay?
If you want to. It's your choice.
My name is Dervish Mahmoud Chahaic.
Wonderful. Can we call you Dervis? Would that be all
Dervis is
right?
fine.
Okay,
That's
just want to make
excellent.
sure we
No
won't
problem.
offend you. Oh, I'm not going to get that last name. Okay. You've never applied for a position before with the city?
No.
So what we're
with,
going to
Carson
do,
City, no,
okay, we're going to ask you a series of questions.
no problem.
Then when we get done, you're welcome to take a seat in the audience.
Of course.
Because we have an additional person to interview, and then we'll make our decision.
Okay, thank you very much, Lori.
You're welcome. So I'm going to start. Tell us about your training and experience that qualifies you to hold this position and why you want to serve as treasurer.
Okay, so that's a good question, by the way, Lori. I originally came from Bosnia. It's like 20 plus years, and I have a kind of like a knack for the logical thinking, critical thinking for math, and I knew I'm gonna do something either engineering or finance. So I applied myself pretty well, get to like education. After that, I start working in the industry. I started working for the finance company, Clear Capital. They're like one of the leading companies in real estate evaluation. Kind of like build up my skills from there, and then moved to work for a division of the healthcare financing policy. Stayed there about a year, managed the program and audited the program. That program was federally funded, like 90% was provided with federal government, 10% with our state. It was like a really, really interesting experience. It was like a very, very, very demanding experience, and I had to like keep a keen eye on those details. And basically, it was like hard and challenging to administer those like hard-earned tax dollars. After that, I worked for the event management company. That was also like a really, really challenging role. So that was in a private sector. I traveled a lot, led like a small team of the financial professionals, and my main role was like to manage the risk and also like a financial planning and the budgeting. So I was like a really, really fast-paced company. So the timelines were like utmost importance. This company provided events for like for small businesses, like let's say like 30 people. But then we had like events like involved with like a couple thousand people, and we traveled a lot abroad. Spent a lot of time in South America and sometime in Europe and Spain, even like close to my country. And after that, I work in taxation. I really like that job. It was like really like tailored perfectly for me. there was always something to learn, something new, and I had to audit like small businesses, uh, large businesses like a biggest organization, for example, like a local hospital. That was very, very, very challenging task. And during my career, I work in the public sector. I work in the government jobs, and I love the challenges. I love working with the people, and I tried. So that's like a kind of like my acumen. And why would I like for the treasury? Why would I like for the this like a great city, great state? I came in this country with $20, and I built up myself pretty much like from nothing. So I would like to serve it these people and give it back. That's my honest answer.
Thank you. So explain the process and steps by which private property may be sold for non-payment of taxes, and what latitude, if any, does the treasurer have in complying with those steps?
Okay, so well, that's a good question. I work for the Evaluation Real Estate company. We had like a very like a few of these cases, but usually it can happen like people like either get like really ill and they cannot like keep up with the payments, especially with the tax payment. I guess they would have to like get informed with authorities of what's going on, because this is like a progressive process. It's not like the people would come right away to chase them out. So try kind of like work with the people if they're like if they fall back on their payments. And I would say like it takes at least like probably like 5 6 months to go through this process. And usually people, as I said, usually it's either ailment or some case people like deceased, they cannot pay the taxes up. And yeah, that's like pretty much how I see it. What was the second part of the question? I'm sorry about that.
If you thought you had any latitude
How do you mean?
in the, do you have any, you can comply or not comply with a rule, but what you think you have the authority to do?
Well, I guess like probably it's not like one person decision to make. Probably there should be some commission to see what's going on and kind of like to develop the case, so to see how to proceed with the action, you know. But of course, like the final decision. I mean, if really there's no like other option, if there are all options exhausted, is like to take a property and sell it basically to try to bring the revenues, because as I imagine, like the budgets are always modest, you know, especially for the local government bodies, and especially like in crisis like this, you know.
Thank you so much. Supervisor Giomi?
All right, thank you. And Dervis, thank you for applying.
Thank you, Stacy.
The city's investment and portfolio policy lists 10 or so options that are authorized for investment. What method will you use to determine the city's investment strategy? And please
Well,
be
I
specific.
apologize.
No, it's okay.
For that, for
Thank you.
interruption. I guess that's like a great part of the business, of the job, of the position, is liquidity of the funds, and basically to meet obligations and to provide that liquidity. So there is, as as I was reading the prospectus, there is like that like a portfolio of the different debt obligations and different like financial instruments to manage the fund. So I've read it like in detail, and I completely like agree with the policies. I mean, the most important is like to concentrate on the preserving the basically the wealth, like the original amounts, and if there are any like reserves to invest them like in a safe financial instruments. Mostly, I would say, like in the government, like T-bonds with let's say like with like a 3 months like expiry date, and then I mean, if you have some additional funds that we know that we might not need like in the future to invest in government bonds, like a longer term period with caution, because in this day and climate, as you know, like the interest rate is like very low. So in it, it's kind of like a high expectation that eventually that interest rate it will go. So that like comes in play how to plan for those investments. Probably that's like the most involved part, because we really wouldn't like to lose the money there. So I'm not sure how big is the like team in management all this like investment, because what I read is pretty big, and that comes in part with some like let's say some technical details becomes like a play like how to plan for those like bond portfolios. Uh, I like the bonds because they have like a macular duration, and for a certain time, those like portfolios are immunized. So we know like exactly like a moment when should we like sell this like
Yeah, on a
investment
schedule, yeah.
instruments. Yeah, but that's like a highly involved process. I know that. That's like
The treasurer is a city department head with the authority of an elected official. And really, in reality, you report only to the electorate. However, I believe that the citizens of our community expect a smooth operating government where everyone works collaboratively. How will you balance your elected autonomy with the cooperation necessary to work as a member of a larger city team?
I guess like I mean day-to-day operation, that's obvious. But some like let's say like something like that comes up agenda has something that has to be like major issues. It should be like kept transparent. Basically, hold like special sections if something has to be like resolved, like that probably one person should not like bring like a decision by itself. That's like very important. Then hold like meetings and explain what we're doing and what's our like priorities, our agenda, how the funds are spent, and keep to like detailed records of our activities.
Supervisor White?
Thank you. Thank you for applying for this position.
Thank you, Maurice.
What is the most important function of the treasurer's office, and what will you do to make that function operate better?
Okay. I would say like most important function is to make sure that funds are available for the internal payments, for the payroll, for the projects that are planned. And second part of the question, and of course, preserve the funds. That's very important. And in this like a day and age, as I said, the funds are usually modest. So what can I do better? I would try to, I mean, probably like in the first like 90 days, try like to inform myself as much as possible of what are like pertinent issues, what we're supposed to like lack in the current plans. Trying to like bring the people like together. I know it's kind of like a sound a little bit repetitive, but the most important agenda is like to bring like people together to see my point of view and try to do like my function with utmost like professionalism, respect to everyone. So what can I do better? I can probably do some financial technical parts better, because that's my expertise, and I have a long-standing relationship with all professors for VNR. So if I need like advice and something that's like very pertinent on how to preserve the funds, how to make our portfolio work better. So I have that line open too. So that's my answer.
Thank you.
Supervisor Jones?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Stan.
A lot of people feel, and including myself, that if you are appointed to this position and you decide to rerun for election, that as the incumbent, that gives you a head up, or leg up. Do you plan to run if you are appointed in 2 years for reelection?
Of course I do, but I would like to be chosen on the merit, not just like on the professional connection and like meeting the people, because as you said, that will give you advantage. But if the better person comes aboard, it's perfectly fine with me for other person to better person to get elected. Same like today, let's better person win, so.
Okay. How would you deal with a taxpayer that declined to pay part of their taxes because they were unhappy with the city's performance in a particular area? How would you resolve that?
Well, as I said, it should be a process, and I mean, it should be open line of communication and explain what's going on and why such a decisions are brought at the moment. Because as I say, like everyone is a general after the battle, But like let's say like a current climate, current like economic condition, it's so many probably like opportunities and they're probably available in past and projects that you have to forego. So to answer like simple terms that question, try to explain that like a person what's going on like in detail, why we did, let's say like we're not able to do that excellent job in particular matter. So, but in my personal opinion, mostly it comes to the funds, to funds availability. Not
Okay.
for the, because I know that most people work really hard and try to do their jobs like to their best abilities. So,
Thank you.
Supervisor Shute?
Hello and welcome.
hi, Lisa.
Tell me a time when you established rapport and a positive tone with a person or group where perspectives or opinions differed.
Okay, that's a really good question. Just thinking about top of my head. Well, I had one of the biggest audits for the local hospital, and the CFO of the hospital was kind of like feeling bothered with so many questions we had. So they changed their like designation. They were like a nonprofit organization. Now they're for profit. So basically, now they're asking us for some like refund on the sales taxes, and that was like a really informed like involved project. So it was running like for like a, let's say like a 6 weeks. So basically, I had to like to sit with this person, try to explain what we're trying to do, because they're not like a slush funds in our government, so we can like just pull out. They're asking like about $1.5 million, so just like to pull out like $1.5 million and pay it, So basically, I tried to explain to him we have to like account for all issues, what's going on before we like issue check, but. To get there, you need to learn about your like accounting process, like how you like report your revenues, and there's some like elements, some of the medical tools, medical supplies that are like tax deductibles. We had to go all through all those like records, and basically what I did, I was like after a while like held like a weekends meeting every like a week, try to like to get like all stakeholders together and explain what's going on, why are we doing this, and why is so involved.
Great. Well, thank you. And then my other question is, what talent and or expertise can you contribute to the treasurer's office, kind of above what you've talked about already?
Okay. Well, what I say, Mom, it's kind of sounds like maybe like a little bit cliche, but I'm a like really like organized person. I have like excellent interpersonal skills, communication skills. Although English is not my like first language. Like my additional talent is like a technical expertise in the financing, and I can like dig up like information like really fast. Whatever question you have, I'll have it probably like to the end of the day. If it's not something like a really has to be like involve some kind of like a long run analysis. And I'm a persistent, and I like the people that I work with, and the most people that work with me, they like me.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So my final question for you.
Sure.
What would be your immediate goals and objectives if appointed to the position in the first 90 days?
As I said, like first you have to be like a detailed analysis for like portfolio, our revenues. Try to figure out probably the ways. How can we do like a revenue collection better? Is there any way to do that? And how to better manage the portfolio, like with our investments. And I would say like the first two agendas. Of course, like to meet the people, as many as possible, to get those like connections and contacts, and hit the floor and start running, you know. So
Okay, thank you so very
Thank you.
much. You're welcome to sit in the audience while we interview the
Of
final
course.
candidate, and then we'll be making a decision.
thank you very much.
And
Thank
again,
you.
thank you so much for interviewing. Okay, we have Mr. Razor, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor. How you doing?
Wonderful, thank you. Would you state your name for the record, please?
Andrew Razor.
Okay, a little bit how the process works. We're each going to ask you a question or so, too. And then at the end of this, since you're the final candidate, you can just remain, and we will then confer with one another and make a decision on who
Okay.
we're going to appoint. So I'm going to start with the first question. Tell us about your training and experience that qualifies you to hold this position, and why do you want to serve as treasurer?
Okay, as far as my training and expertise, for almost 21 years, I worked for the Nevada Department of Public Safety, and the last 7-8 years of my career, I was a lieutenant for Nevada Department of Public Safety Investigation Division, or NDI. Originally, my first responsibility at NDI as a lieutenant was a headquarters commander, and so I was in charge of overseeing our budget, which is our biennial budget, as far as helping to put that together, monitoring and tracking our expenses, our different budget categories such as investigative expense, travel expense, our grant funds, our buy funds that we'd use for confidential informants, purchase of evidence. As far as the grants, I was in charge of not only tracking the grants, but also writing the grants. So every year we would have what's called the Justice Assistance Grant. And it's a competitive grant in which we apply for funds from the Office of Criminal Justice Assistance with Nevada DPS. And that grant that we got every year actually helped to provide additional funding, which we had, essentially didn't have, especially in those slim budget years, when the state had cut back in funding with furloughs and that. And usually those grants had several different components to them. So like with the JAG grant, we'd have personnel overtime, we'd have equipment, and also some of our, investigative expenses we use on a limited basis. And so with that, with just those justice assistance grants there, my responsibility was not only writing the grant, but also doing the quarterly reports where I'd have to track the expenses, also have to track information for both the Bureau of Justice Assistance online report, which I'd have to file, and then also the quarterly report, which would go to OCJA as well. And so there was a lot of moving parts as far as not only tracking the money, but also tracking the statistical information needed, such as cases that we generated, the types of evidence we seized, drugs purchased, weapons seized, anything like that. And so that was one of my responsibilities there. But get back to my experience with the fiscal part of it is when I was the headquarters commander, like I said, I had the responsibility of overseeing, with the chief and the deputy chief, the budget process. So that was working with DPS fiscal to build our biennial budget, the different categories, for personnel, for uniforms, equipment, for travel, training, investigative expenses, investigative travel. And so there was a lot of components there as well in tracking that. Moving on, when I transferred from headquarters commander at NDI over to the Nevada Threat Analysis Center, which is part of NDI as well, but I was the director for NTAC. Same thing where I was in charge of oversight of the 3 federal grants that we have, Homeland Security grants. And so essentially NTAC would compete every year for Homeland Security funds, usually from anywhere from 600 to 700,000 per grant. And those grants covered a couple of different things. One was personnel, would cover our terrorism fusion liaison officer, our critical infrastructure key resources officer. And then we also had an intel analyst that was assigned as well. And so those paid the salaries for them. But then parts of the grant also covered our expenses for software, computer licenses, for our media campaigns, such as Keep Nevada Safe, and also the website that NTAC used as well. And so in each of those assignments, not only did I have the fiscal responsibility of tracking, monitoring, providing updates of the funds used, but it was also helping to build a budget, project what we needed, and then also making sure that we were in compliance with, DPS guidelines, with state fiscal, the guidelines you'd see under Nevada Administrative Code and also NRS to make sure that we were in compliance with what we needed to do legally as far as that. And so there was a lot of components that I managed in both NTAC and both as NDI headquarters commander that I feel gave me a lot of experience, fiscally. Some of the other things I did as far as my fiscal experience was also investigative equipment purchases. And if we didn't have the money, writing grants, doing the research of the components we needed. For example, one year we desperately needed investigative equipment for the detectives, consistent of cameras, digital measurement tools. And so I had to put together, the research to show these are the items we need and why, and then also how much they cost, get from the different vendors that were approved through the state, and then submit that for the grant review process to get the money, and then purchase the items, and then of course track the grant until it was completed. And then also in addition was the purchase of vehicles for the agency as well. And that in itself was kind of a time-consuming process because in purchasing the vehicles, you're granted so much money. So usually I think we were around $85,000 a year for purchase of 3 vehicles. And then also any type of equipment to fit it, lights, sirens, radios, the gun racks for the vehicles. And so that would cause or, have me go out, look at the different vehicles that were available, making sure that we were getting from the approved vendors on the state contract list, and then starting the process. And so usually I would start the process in probably April or May so that we could get everything together so that by June we could have all the numbers ready so that we could be on the Board of Examiners for approval in July. Because without the Board of Approval or Board of Examiners approval, we couldn't purchase the vehicle, even though we had legislative authority for it. And so once we got, BOE purchase approval, then we can move forward with it. And so I think knowing these different subtleties when I learned my job as the headquarters commander or through NTAC director, knowing that there was a lot of subtleties in how to track money, how to use money. I think that gives me experience for this current position with the Treasurer's Office, where you have obligations under Nevada revised statute and also under the city charter as to what the duties and responsibility for the treasurer are, and then the oversight of that money and the responsibility for it. As far as your question as to why I would like that job as the treasurer, not only do I believe I have the qualifications and the temperament for it, but essentially I've been in Carson City since I was 4 years old, minus a few years when I had to transfer out to Winnemucca. But I've always considered this my home because it is. And so for me, this would be a great opportunity to serve the community that has been home for me for so many years.
Thank you. Explain the process and steps by which private property may be sold for non-payment of taxes and what latitude, if any, does the treasurer have in complying with those steps to resolve the tax deficiency?
Okay. As it relates to the tax efficiency, so every March, the treasurer's office sends out the statement for individuals, for property owners to pay taxes. This is what they're required to pay. I'm sorry, in July. And so that's their annual tax statement. And individuals can opt to pay in 4 installments throughout the year. You know, the third week in August, first week in October, first week in January, and then the first week in March. And so people can pay their installments based on that. So if for some reason that an individual would not comply with that, where, you know, whether they fell on hardship or anything like that, they would become deficient. So under NRS 361.5648, that explains the process as far as the steps for deficiency. So if an individual were to, say like for this year, not have paid in their installments in March, then they would be noticed. The treasurer's office for that first Monday in March would then send a notice to them, certified mail, explaining under NRS 361.5648 that you have, you know, become deficient. Here is the process, the steps which will take place if you don't pay, and that includes the interest and penalties which will accrue. And so that would go to the homeowner, the property owner, and also to any lien holder, such as the mortgage company. They would be served with that. So after that notice is properly given to the property owner and the lien holder, 30 days after that, the treasurer's office would then submit an affidavit to you as the Board of Supervisors explaining that this individual or this property owner did not pay taxes as required by law. I believe that's under 361.480, that they are now deficient, and recognizing to the Board of Supervisors that this person or that property is now delinquent. And so with that, after 30 days, they would then be noticed in the newspaper or the local newspaper for that area, or even on the website, that these are the properties that are in deficiency. And then in July, after the first Monday in June, in which a property owner has not paid, then a certificate would be filed with the recorder's office stating that the treasurer's office has noticed the property owner to pay the taxes, and that after 2 years, if they have not, then the property is subject for sale. And then again, the process starts where the annual tax statement is sent out in July for that property, which would also recognize any penalties or interest that they would have to pay. So then you get into the third year, it's the same thing. In July, they would be given a notice that, you know, here's their annual tax statement, and here's also the penalties and interest which you must pay, you know, for that property. And then when the property has now essentially, if the property owner has not paid those taxes and is still remaining in deficiency or deficient, then the treasurer's office would then essentially notice that, you know, if they don't pay, the property will become, or the treasurer will become owner in trust of that property. Again, a notice is provided to the property owner and the lien holder that, again, you know, you need to pay the taxes and any penalties and interest. And then following that, you move into essentially, if there's no payment, now you start to look into the sale of that property for taxes, where you're going to notice the property owner again, provide them with a sufficient notice. You'll then request that a title company do a title search prior to any sale of the property. Again, notice it in the newspaper, on the website, that the property is up for sale, and then begin the proceedings. And then the Board of Supervisors would then approve any properties for sale. And then once the Board of Supervisors has given authorization for the sale of any properties, then the treasurer's office can move forward with a tax sale in order to claim those tax efficiencies. You mentioned about what latitude does the treasurer have. The treasurer's office, the only real latitude that the treasurer's office has is in essentially dissolving or making sure that they are allowing the property owner not to pay any penalties or interest if it falls under a certain category. So under, I think, NRS 361, 4835, the treasurer does have the authority to dismiss any penalties or interest, provided it falls under an exemption, a qualifying exemption such as a major medical event or death or illness, in destruction of the property such as through a fire. It can't just be for something simple like I didn't get the notice in the mail. The law is specific that the property owner does have to show proof that they didn't receive it, such as, they put the payment in the mail and they had a certified proof from the post office that they did try to pay taxes. It just can't be, I didn't get it in the mail and that was it. It's very specific as to what latitude the treasurer has. The treasurer just can't say, well, you're not going to pay your taxes or you're just not going to pay the penalties and interest. Again, the law is specific that it has to be a qualifying event and it's only for the penalties and interest for the taxes that are owed. But the property owner still has to pay whatever taxes are delinquent or whatever is owed on that residence or property.
Thank you so very much. Supervisor Giomi?
All right, thank you, Andrew, and thank you for applying.
Thank you.
The city's investment and portfolio policy lists 10 or so options that are authorized for investment. What method will you use to determine the city's investment strategy? And if you could, please be specific.
Okay, so you were saying the 10 options for
Yeah,
investments?
the city's investment and portfolio policy lists 10 or so options that are authorized for investment. What method will you use to determine the city's investment strategy?
So in looking at the city's investment strategy, it mirrors quite a bit what the state treasurer has under Nevada Revised Statute 355. In fact, I think it's 140 under NRS 355. It specifically states what the authorized instruments of investment are when you get into treasury certificates and bonds, corporate paper, money market accounts, asset-backed securities, collateralized mortgage obligations. Those are a few of what is authorized, but it's specific as to what the treasurer's office can specifically invest in. And again, it mirrors what the state treasurer has. And in fact, the Clark County Treasurer's Office has a policy very similar to the state treasurer because they're using the same language as far as what they're using. So in my role as treasurer, I would follow the city's policy because, one, it mirrors what the state treasurer utilizes, which is essentially an approved practice within government, and follow the guidelines as to what money we can invest in or what instruments we can invest in. Like I said, treasury bond certificates, all of those items which you look at that the city treasurer can use, they're all essentially safe investment strategies for the use of state funds. In fact, when you look at NRS, it pretty much is specific as to how the money can be invested. And so, again, following what the investment policy is, I'd want to make sure that, again, that any investments are approved, but that we're looking at our three objectives, as stated in the investment policy, which is, safety, liquidity, and return on investment. So I'd want to balance, what objects or what, instruments we could use that could provide the money that would be used for investment to give us some type of return versus the safety, and then can we pull it out? So right now, the city currently has a couple different investments. So one is the local government investment pool through the state treasurer's office. That's essentially kind of our short term. And then it has, for its long-term accounts, through FTN Main Street, and then also government portfolio advisors. Those are the two that the city is currently using. In my conversation with former Treasurer Gail Robertson, she was informing me that essentially the long-term ones that we have for the city through GPA and FTN Main Street are actually providing better results on return as far as the money we're getting. I think we're getting probably around a 2.6% interest back on that versus I think 1.6 right now with the local government investment pool through the state of Nevada. So again, just kind of sum it up, I would follow our current policy because, one, it's been approved by you as the Board of Supervisors, but it's also one that mirrors the policy currently in place by the state treasurer, which is also being used by other county entities such as Clark County. So you know that it's a proven method It's safe. It's not anything that is going to be putting the city's money at risk, with some of these other investments that you would see, such as a personal portfolio where people are looking more for stocks or things like that.
Okay. The treasurer is a city department head with the authority of an elected official. And really, in reality, you report only to the electorate. However, I believe that the citizens of our community expect a smooth operating government that works collaboratively. So how will you balance your elected autonomy with the cooperation necessary to work as a member of the larger city team?
First of all, in looking at it, when you look at the treasurer, there's a reason why it is defined in not only NRS, under NRS 249, but also under the city charter under Article 3, Section 045. And when you look at it, I think it's a checks and balance. There's a reason why the treasurer's office is an elected position. It's not one that falls directly under the Board of Supervisors or under a mayor or another department head. It has that autonomy to provide that checks and balances, especially because you're dealing with the funds. But at the same extent, I also believe it needs to work in collaboration with the Board of Supervisors. In fact, when you look at the NRS 249, it talks about how the treasurer's office needs to make sure that the office and books and records are open to inspection for the Board of Supervisors at any time. So I believe that shows that there's that collaboration to be had there, even though it's an autonomous office. But one of the things in my previous career is in working with different sheriffs or political figures, I always found that you still need to serve their need. They may not have been the sheriff for your area or the political figure that you would report directly to, but you still needed to work with them because in general, there's the mission that you have to fulfill. But I find a lot of times, and especially lately in political entities and governments, you find that you have political figures or groups that don't want to work together. And at some point, you have to work with somebody. You need either something that they have, they need something that you got, vice versa. But there's always some type of give and take. And I kind of wish that political entities would work better together so that it comes together for the good of the people. And as for me, again, that autonomy, even though the treasurer's office is elected and reports directly to the people, I still believe it needs to work with the various other entities that it serves, such as the Board of Supervisors, the City Finance Office. You're going to be working as a treasurer with a different, city government offices, whether it's parks, recreation, whether it's with the courts. You still have to work with them in order to maintain, a smooth flow and make sure that at the end of the day, the monies that are being collected in are being collected in a smooth, efficient manner, and that there's no hiccups or anything that's going to be causing problems for the city, especially when it comes to finances and then trying to point fingers. And that's not the way to do it.
Supervisor White?
Thank you. Thanks for coming here today.
Thank you, sir.
What's the most important function of the treasurer's office, and what would you do to make that function operate better?
I think as far as most important, I think there's actually a few. First of all, you have the collection of revenues, and that's why when I mentioned earlier that it's an elected position, there's a reason for it. I think the ability of a government to tax its citizens to obtain money in order to provide services is a very important function, and that's why it is an elected position to respond directly to the people. So when you look at the most important function, I believe would be the smooth and efficient collection of taxes, revenues within city government, and then being able to disperse that to the various entities within the city government for operation. So taking in property taxes and collection, taking in fees, and then using that, to fund the various operations for government, whether it's, for the roads to make sure that the roads are drivable, that in the wintertime we have plows to be able to remove snow, that we have wastewater, services, water services. So I think the most important is that smooth collection of revenue, and that it's done legally as prescribed under law. and then under the city charter. But I also believe that another important function for the treasurer's office is being able to collect the money, but work with the various other entities in order to manage the cash flow. Even though the city finance office is the one that essentially, they're kind of like the controller for the city, they're managing the money, how it's moving, how it's being utilized by the different departments and building the budget. It still requires the treasurer's office for taking in the income in the legal way, and then working with finance office to make sure that you have a smooth operation in order that you don't have any hiccups that are going to cause problems with the funds being able to be used by the city, especially when they need it.
Supervisor Jones?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
A lot of people feel, myself included, that if you are appointed for this position, and in 2 years from now you run, you would be running as the incumbent. Is this a reason for running, and would you run again in 2 years?
Yes, to break your question into the two parts, I think this opportunity as far as the appointment gives whoever receives the appointment the opportunity to learn the job. You know, you might come from a background, whether it's a CPA or like for me, you know, having managed, you know, fiscal budgets and, you know, law enforcement operations, but you still need to learn the day-to-day functions of what this treasurer's office does. You know, as far as how you take in the money, how the collection process works, how you're using the different database systems, such as the Tyler accounting system, to track funds, to reconcile funds, working with, like I said, the finance office, working with the board of supervisors, working with the various other city offices to know the processes. So in my experience, I've seen that it usually takes anywhere from 18 months to 2 years for somebody who's put into a new position to start to learn the subtleties of the job, to start to learn what the rules and regulations, the policies and procedures for that job are. And so I think by this appointment, the individual that receives it will have that opportunity to develop those skills, to know what is needed to better improve the office if that's, you know, his goal. But also when it comes time to campaign for the office, can now explain to the public why he believes that he would be the best fit, because having done this job for 18 months, he would now see, here's the issues I've identified as needing change, or here's a way we can improve it, or here's the system that we have in place that is effective and efficient for the taxpayers and the citizens, and to build upon that experience.
Thank you. How would you deal with a taxpayer that declined to pay their taxes because they were unhappy with the city's performance in a particular area?
For me, the first thing I'd want to do is I'd want to allow that person, you know, sit down with them. And I know in COVID we have to be kind of maybe a little bit spacious, but I think one of the biggest things when it comes to the citizens and any complaints they have of government is a lot of times they don't feel that they're being listened to, and that they don't have anybody that actually takes their complaint or their feedback seriously. So the first thing I'd want to do is sit down with the taxpayer, have him or her explain what the issue is. Is it something that's specifically with my office as treasurer? Is it something that has to deal with perhaps the roads, you know? Is it drainage, you know, their residents, you know, the storm drains? And find out exactly what it is. And then from there, you know, maybe be able to help that individual solve the problem. Like I said, if it's something with, you know, drainage, we call it public works, and say, I have this taxpayer here, Mr. Smith, that has issues because, you know, his drain along the side of his house or next to the house is constantly over flooding or having issues with it, and work to fix that. Again, I think so many times people just feel that they're not being heard, and especially with COVID, I think any of the city offices you go into now, there's plexiglass, there's barriers between the people, and I think a lot of them are finding that it's hard to express frustration or any type of concerns or problems they have with government. So I think by just meeting with the taxpayer, finding out what the problem is probably going to pay big dividends in not only solving that problem, but also helping them become more aware that that you feel for the problem that they have. The next thing I'd want to do after hearing their problem is then advise them that, while I sympathize with the problem you have, and I'm definitely going to try to help you, rectify whatever the problem is by, pointing you to the right direction, or if it's something I can handle, would also be to explain to them that under Nevada law, under, Chapter 361, it specifically states that you have to pay your tax. It's not a, do I want to pay my taxes? It says should or shall. It's, you have to pay your taxes. I believe that's under 361-480 that, the treasurer's office will send out the tax statements, what the person owes, and now this is what you're required to pay. If they have any type of issue with the tax bill itself, they can always go to the assessor's office if there's some type of issue that they think that they're being overcharged or what it is. But either way, the law is pretty specific. You have to pay your taxes for the properties that you have. And so let them know that you have to pay it. And then let them also know that if you don't pay it, even if you have a complaint with government, that's not the remedy for it, because now you're going to start to accrue penalties and interest. And now what was, let's just say, for example, if their tax bill was, $2,000, for that year, now you're accruing penalties and interest. And now it's going to increase what they owe. And now they're going to be possibly subject to their house being sold for tax sale for the payments. The city is pretty, or the law is pretty specific that you have to pay your taxes, and the city has to collect those taxes, not only for its operations, but also to fund the schools, also to provide the revenue to the state on certain projects, and also to bonds that, the city has taken out. So it's not a optional thing. You have to pay it. But there is a way that an elected official, such as the treasurer, if a citizen does have a complaint, can try to work to make that situation better for them.
Thank you.
Supervisor Schutte?
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tell me about a time when you established rapport and a positive tone with a person or group where perspectives and opinions differed.
I think throughout my career, having worked investigations, that provided me a lot of opportunities, whether it was with somebody who was facing criminal charges or working with elected officials, working with different agency heads. And looking at an example where I had a positive interaction, as you said, I think one that comes to mind readily is when I was at NTAC. We had moved the Safe Voice school safety program under the Nevada Threat Analysis Center. It originally was under NDI headquarters, and we moved under NTAC. And at that time, Safe Voice was in its first year, and so it was kind of an infancy before we went live throughout the state. So essentially, we were just working with a couple of the school districts throughout the state before we went live through for all school districts throughout the 17 counties. And I remember it was a Friday night, I was at class, and I got a call from one of the Safe Voice supervisors. And let me back up. If you're not familiar with Safe Voice, essentially it's an anonymous platform that, whether students, individuals with schools, employees, or the public at large can anonymously report a school-related issue, whether it's bullying, cyberbullying, suicide, harms, weapons, anything like that. And the one that came on that Friday night, the supervisor called me and says, hey, sir, we just got a report that a 12-year-old child called in, or I should say, I think they typed in is what it was, reporting a possible suicide threat. And so the issue they had is that they can dialogue back in real time with the person who's, submitting the tip. And the child had essentially, stated that they were suicidal and didn't respond back. And so they were having an issue trying to identify who the child was so they could give it to a first responder agency. And so essentially what had happened is the child had moved. And so when we contacted the Department of Education, because they could provide us with the information of who that child was, contact information that we could then give it to a first responding, like a police office or a sheriff's office. And so they were trying to reestablish contact, but all the contact information was outdated, so they couldn't find out, where the child was. And so they called me in, and looking at the tip information that they gave me and what they knew about the child, I was able to, essentially, I think within 2 phone calls, I was able to identify a relative of that child. And then, it was essentially the child's grandmother. And, when I called the grandmother and said, hey, your grandchild has expressed, a suicidal thought, we're trying to, find out where, the child is. The grandparent had never heard of Safe Voice. So I think it was kind of, one, me trying to establish the rapport right away, this is who I am. You can verify my identity and credentials, through the DPS dispatch, here's my credential number. And I was able to convince the grandparent to actually, give me the child's mother's phone number. And so when I was able to call the child's mother and explain what happened, and again, had to kind of go through the steps as to, what had happened, the mother's like, my child's been here this whole time. I'm finding this hard to believe that, you got a suicide threat, involving my child. Well, what had happened is the child was with the parent, but the child had stepped out of the room and essentially contacted Safe Voice, expressed suicidal thoughts. And the mother didn't know that. And so it was a successful outcome because, first of all, there was, like I said, we couldn't identify, where the child was at in order to get, a first responder to go and make contact and do a welfare check on the child. But then even the parent didn't know that the child had expressed suicidal thoughts. And essentially what happened is the child was being bullied in school and was having a hard time with it. And that's why the child had contacted Safe Voice. So for me, it was a very positive outcome because one, potential suicide, we were able to, get first responders to go to the house, conduct a welfare check of the child, but also the parent became involved. And I remember the parent telling us they were going to take the child to behavioral health, that night to have the child, speak with a counselor and see what they could do to help the child. So I think it was a very positive outcome, based on the circumstances for that evening.
Thank you. And my next question, what talent and/or expertise can you contribute to the treasurer's office above or beyond what you've already talked about? Is there anything that you haven't told us about?
I think as far as my talents and abilities and what skills, like I said, my experience as a law enforcement officer not only allowed me to operate, fiscal programs, to manage them, grant programs, but also allowed me opportunities to work in different settings. So I worked, investigations, I worked, in major crimes, I worked different areas within, my department that allowed me skill sets, dealing with the public. It allowed me skill sets as far as dealing with political figures, with elected officials, with agency heads that I think as the treasurer, essentially the treasurer is an executive level position. Even though this office is small, it only has, 5 employees, including the treasurer, it's still an elected official, it's an executive position. It deals with, you, the board of supervisors, it deals with other agency heads and elected officials. And I think my skill sets, having supervised investigative units, run administrative programs, work on various boards, whether in my personal life or with my time at NDI when I was on the Homeland Security Resiliency Commission with child safety programs. It allowed me to work with different entities that, not only established rapport, but helped to work on common problems. And so I think that experience gives me skills that I can bring in and working with the public and working with you as the Board of Supervisors and working with the different agency heads throughout the city. Because essentially the treasurer's office collects from, I think, 23 or 24 different agencies throughout the city, between parks, the courts, public guardian. I mean, there's all kinds of money coming in. So you have to work with these agency heads, on issues that come about, working with the public, kind of like the example of you have a taxpayer that, doesn't want to pay their taxes. It's finding out what the problem is and then working for a solution with it. But it's also working with, the state or the city's investment advisors, whether it's FTN Main Street or GPA, you're working with them. You're working as an agency head, working for the best solution, an outcome for the money that's being invested. So I think for me, I think that's a skill set, that I bring. I think the other thing too, and having worked in my current position, with the Department of Alternative Sentencing and being the money courier, I've worked with almost all of the different offices throughout city government. So I'm aware of, who's doing the reporting, the collection of the funds, whether, it's at the sheriff's office or over at Parks or what. So I have that, I think, experience and that connection with them, that if there's an issue, I can contact the right person and be able to work out any type of issues that come about. I think the other thing too is, like I said, working with the public. Some of that is also going to be with the bank. Right now the city works with Bank of America, and so from time to time you have issues that come up. How can we make the process better? Or we're having an issue on deposits. It gives you that opportunity now to work with them, as the agency head to bring about a good resolution to it.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so for your final question of the day, what would be your immediate goals or objectives if appointed to this position in the first 90 days?
I think first, in looking at that, I would break it up into short-term and long-term goals, because even though you're talking about a time period of 90 days, there'd be some that I'd want to establish immediately, and others I'd want to start building on to start working past that. In looking at it, the first one would be the position which the treasurer's office is going to be gaining here come July 1st. They're going to be getting an accountant position. And talking with Chief Deputy Beth Huck, explaining that position will just be for a year, but that position is going to be very critical for the treasurer's office because there's a lot of work that position can do, and so as an accountant position, you want to, first of all, find the right fit. You want to get the right person for that position and interviewing them. Make sure you have a person that has a personality that would fit that office nicely. The current treasurer's office staff, they work well with each other. They have a good morale there that I'd want to keep. I think morale is always a force multiplier when it comes to any type of office setting, so I wouldn't want to ruin that. So my first goal, short-term goal, would be filling that position and seeing what duties we can assign for that individual to start working on. Even if it's just for a year, what can we do that would enhance the productivity of the treasurer's office? That maybe later on that position might be one that becomes permanent, or it might be something that allows some of the workload to decrease. That would help the treasurer's office. I know in my previous time at NDI, when we were using contractors to help with records management projects, where we were scanning documents into our records management system, just having that temporary position, even if it was for a year, greatly took some of the workload off for the existing staff so they could focus on other stuff to get ahead or finish some of the projects. I think my next short-term goal would be looking at some of the issues that the treasurer's staff has reported about computer issues, with the Tyler system. They've mentioned to me that it's a new system, that from time to time they do have issues with it, whether it's trying to get training, getting the right training, or when there's some type of problem that comes up, making sure that it's resolved quickly. I would want to find out what exactly is the problem that they're talking about and how can we remedy it quick enough. My next short term would then be to look at our investment policy and our investments to see what it is, where we're going. I know in speaking with former Treasurer Gail Robertson, she talked about how, like the GPA, how they can provide, because it's non-discretionary account, that GPA would essentially provide her with options. Here's option A, here's option B, here's option C as far as the investment of money. And so I want to start looking at where we're looking at for our investments with that agency, and especially with some of the economic storms you might be coming to see, in the next few months with, inflation coming, gas, whatever, how's that going to impact what the markets are that the city is investing its money. So I want to speak with our investors to find out what exactly do we need to look at for potential problems, or are we going to be fine? I think former Treasurer Robertson had talked about how GPA and FTN Main Street, essentially our long-term accounts for the city, are doing better on their rates of return compared to the local government investment pool. In looking at long-term, one of the things I'd want to look at, and this is something in speaking with the treasurer staff, is looking at, is there a way that we could streamline some of the collection and reporting being done by the other offices throughout the city? So when Parks is taking in money, when, say like the courts are taking in money, even though the courts uses, essentially two different systems, is there a way that we can start making it easier, such as like when an individual writes a check? So like when I pick up the cash and check deposits from the different offices, those checks, or is that something that can be done at that office there, like with the check scanner? Can they now essentially take care of that on their end, to where the treasurer's office now just has to reconcile that balance instead of having to track it from the time they get it, in the money collection that day, until the bank posts it? The next thing, and this is one that, in speaking with former Treasurer Robertson, is that the information drives, the information that's stored on the computer drive, or the city drive there for the treasurer's office, was one that she'd been trying to reorganize. Even though it's a lot of the files there, the digital files there for the treasurer's office are there, they could be better organized so that it's more efficient to find the files, to find the information, to make it a lot easier for treasurer staff to be able to access it when they need to. And then finally, I think my last goal, again, would be the morale of the office. Like I said, and I really can't stress it enough, morale is that X factor, that force multiplier, that if you can keep morale good in an office, you're going to find that the employees are going to do above and beyond what is needed, especially when it comes time when, you might have, an issue come up, hardship, whatever it is, such as, somebody having to go out because of COVID or some type of issue like that, somebody else can help pick up the slack or work on that issue.
Thank you so very much. Okay, that concludes our interview process, and so now we'll bring it back up here and debate who we're going to select. So again, everyone's welcome to stay.
Thank you.
Thank you again for applying. Each and every one of you did a super job. There's no easy decision here. I think each of you scored points in a different area, which actually makes it really more difficult, because some had strengths in some areas where others had it in a different one. So again, thank each and every one of you for doing this. So we're gonna start at that end this time, because she had to break a tie last time. I started last time. So how about Lisa? Do you have a feeling? There's no easy answer here.
I do this every time, but I really, really want folks to know how serious I take this, all my notes, and I sure you saw me scribbling. Like Mayor Bagwell said, everybody excelled in something. One of the reasons I asked the question of what you can contribute is really any job requires a series of skill sets that you need to have the understanding of the job, and it's also important to be able to work with variables and manage those different things. And there's like one point apart from some of the applicants. My first, the person with the most points in this case was Andrew. Is it Razor? And I don't say this lightly, because with the accounting background that this also will take into account, or the financial background, this is, I honestly didn't, reading everything, I am kind of surprised. Just your responses were so well-rounded and so thorough. and in terms of looking at the different, what's required in the law and the nuance of the law and working with the different departments. That said, this isn't easy at all because, again, everyone interviewed so well. I loved your answers. Mr. Dolly, yes, so I will quit mumbling because this is tough, but that would be my choice.
Mr. Jones?
You all presented a good presentation in a little different manner. And I'm confident that each and every one of you could do the job if given a job. I particularly liked Andrew's, what I thought, understanding of his duties. I thought he made a huge attempt to learn about the job. And I liked the way you addressed concern about morale and concern for the employees. That's very important to me. I would vote for Razor.
Okay. Mr. White?
Well, my question came from what I believe to be the most important function of the treasurer's office, and that is keeping our revenues safe and invested in a manner that keeps us operating. And frankly, none of the candidates really have government investing background. So the next thing I have to look at is continuity of service. Who's going to be up to speed the quickest? What's the shortest route to making sure that that office continues to maintain at the level of service that we get now? And I think Mr. Dolly, with his elected official operations over the last many years, will provide us with that fastest up-to-speed service that we need. So I would vote for Mr. Dolly, but I certainly couldn't argue with Mr. Razor either.
Mr. Giommi?
You don't want to go next?
No. Tough decision.
First, I appreciate everyone putting their name out there. This is difficult to go through. I've been where you are, and wasn't successful, but I was better for the experience, the multiple times that I went through it. And regardless of who we pick today, I would encourage all of you to run. I don't think there's anything. Those of us up here who have campaigned will probably tell you that campaigning isn't necessarily fun. But I think I don't believe that for a second.
Yeah.
But it's important because it puts you in front of the public, which is ultimately what we're all here to do, is serve the public. When we appointed Stan to this post, the deciding factor for me was the fact that I don't like that the Board of Supervisors fills positions that the public should be filling by a vote. I understand the law is that way. I understand it has to be that way. I think both Dave and Andrew, in my mind, stood out. I think both of them are beyond competent. I was impressed with them as humans. I was impressed with them with their commitment to serving the public. I would tilt in favor of Andrew because I don't like the idea of having to appoint someone to not only fill this treasurer's seat, but then turn around and fill an assessor's seat as well, when I believe the public should be voting on that. And I believe that we should honor our commitments to the position that we ran for. So my vote is for Andrew.
Okay. I want to, normally, I would say I am completely irrelevant at this point because we have 3 votes for Andrew. But I think it's important, we've had numerous discussions about positions, and we've all had things that drive us to a reason. I've heard Supervisor Jones indicate, and I have too, should we look from within? Because it should be a person with more knowledge and more expertise, and they're ready to go potentially day one. That lends me directly to Mr. Dolly. He has worked with the treasurer's office. He's probably, I would say, based on that, 50% ahead of the game because he has that going for him. I really respect him, and so I can't overlook that component for myself. Then you also look at other issues, as Mr. Giomius said. Well, I like people to finish their commitment. I ran midterm, so I'm not going to hold that against someone. I think that Mr. Dolly would have done that, would have completed his term if Ms. Robertson had completed her term. So it's not really fair for me to hold that against him that he wants to switch midstream. Mr. Razor impressed me on the amount of homework that he did to look at this position. Do I believe that your requisite or your training, skills, and abilities, do I think you can do the job? The answer is yes. Do I think you have specific experience that actually fits the office of the treasurer? I do not. But again, it doesn't mean I don't think you can do the job. And I think that's the real dilemma for me here. Ultimately, I appreciate that all of you said you'll run for the office and the public will make the final decision. So I'm going to tell you that I would vote for Mr. Dolly because I think that the computer system is so vitally important to the role. Right now, we hired or allowed an additional position to come because we know that our deputy treasurer is getting ready to retire, so we put an overlap position in there. I really feel that the computer system, if that doesn't work well, we're going to have utility billing problems. We're not going to have the money. I mean, all those other things to me are secondary because I think we have what all of us already said here, great staff that currently work there. So I just want to put on the record, I don't want Dave to think that I wasn't willing to go out there on a limb and tell you my thoughts. I'm going to vote in favor of Mr. Razor because I also feel it is always important that this board be unified and show support for the candidate that's selected. So if somebody wants to make a motion, we can, I guess we have one question in mind then, if it's going to be Mr. Razor. Part of our motion is the discussion on availability of start date. I'm assuming that's immediate, you can do it, like Monday or something, we could do the start date. Just want to get that out there. I'll accept a motion if someone would like to make it.
I move to appoint Andrew Razor to the position of Carson City Treasurer with a start date of May, what is Monday?
Yeah.
10?
That's,
Is Monday the 10th?
he's a courier part-time with us. Yeah, the 10th? The 10th.
Yeah, with a start date of Monday, May 10th.
Do I have a second by is that a second by Supervisor Jones? I have a motion and a second to appoint Mr. Razor effective May 10th. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carried unanimously. Again, thank you very much. Welcome to the position. It's almost get to work. Okay, thank you. we'll go on now to what is called our final public comment. They're all leaving. I like public is finally getting here. Where are you all? So is there no public comment? Anybody got a final thought? Okay, since there's no final public comment, we're in adjournment. Thank you all for a job well done. And we can maybe still